it must be a good sign, mustn't it, that we book a big hall like this to have a public meeting and it turns into 2 public meetings. Isn't that a sign that UKIP is on the march? Yep. I've come here hot foot from Brussels, where yesterday I was addressing the European Parliament. And sadly, my old friend Herman Van Rumpy-Pumpy wasn't there yesterday. But I'm hoping that I'm going to have a more intelligent audience this afternoon, this evening, than I had yesterday. Because they're all blinded by this dream, by this vision. You see, the plan from the start was to give us a United States of Europe. And that's why it's got a flag. And that's why it's got an anthem. And that's why it's got its own army and its own police force. But the problem is that you weren't told that, were you? And now, as the Euro project is bursting at the seams, they're doing everything they can to maintain it, including, of course, asking you to bail out the Club Med countries that should never have joined the Euro in the first place. Every British household is now on the hook to this Eurozone to the sum of £1,500. And the message from this party, unlike the weasels in the other 3, I never hold back, you know, it's just the way I am. But the message from this party is we should not waste a penny piece more bailing out countries like Greece that should not have joined the Eurozone in the first place and would be better off getting the drachma back and getting back their democracy. Not a penny more. You would have thought, would you not, with this crisis in the Eurozone, that our leaders would be saying now was the time for us to negotiate a better deal. And we were promised by Dave Cameron, mind you, he's good at making promises, isn't he? Do you remember the one about getting rid of the Human Rights Act? Do you remember the one about reducing immigration in this country from hundreds of thousands a year to tens of thousands a year? Do you remember the one about giving you a cast iron guarantee that if I'm Prime Minister, you, the people of this country, will have a referendum? Well, he's done it again, hasn't he? Because he promised us the other week that he would win powers back from Brussels. And in particular, it was to be the Working Time Directive. Because that is damaging not just British industry, but even the National Health Service itself is finding the costs of implementing it are damaging patient services. So yesterday, Chris Grayling, another totally insipid professional politician, just thought I'd throw that in. Chris Grayling was there yesterday in Brussels at the Council of Ministers to defend the British national interest and to negotiate powers coming back on the Working Time Directive. Far from fighting for British interests, he didn't even get into the ring. Because the Germans said, that is not on the agenda, and so meekly, Grayling says, now is not the time. Now is not the time, given the gravity of the crisis, for us to take powers back from Brussels. We will never take powers back from Brussels. And if you're here tonight, whether you in the past have voted Lib Dem, I mean some people do, I've no idea why, but there we are, whether you voted Labour, or whether I suspect in this part of the country, many of you have voted Conservative, there's one thing I want you please to understand. We do not have 3 different parties in this country. They are all the same. They've merged. We've got 3 social democrat parties, led and staffed by career politicians. And I promise you this, if nothing else, what UKIP does and will go on doing is we want to put the people of Britain first. I was on Italian radio last night. I mean, boy, it's something else. But we want a Europe of differences, not a Europe of conformity, not a Europe where one side is supposed to fit all, and whereas we can see it simply doesn't work. All through the history of mankind, whether it's in science, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics, If you come along and challenge the status quo binds together and hurls out its abuse. But it can no longer go on doing that because, frankly, no one believes them. And the opinion polls now show that there's a majority of 2 to 1 in this country who want us freed from these appalling European institutions and want us to have a simple trade deal. We are winning the argument. But we need, I think, as a political party, to do a bit more than just talk about leaving the EU, vital though that is. I think it's incumbent upon UKIP for us to paint our vision of how an independent Britain could and should be run on the big issues of the day that affect ordinary folk and that our politicians haven't got the courage to discuss. And I think the whole question of immigration is very near the top of most people's agenda in this country. What has happened since 1997 is an outrage. Nearly 5 million people have come and settled in this country since 1997. You know, you can think back to the big debate about the Ugandan Asians. Could Britain cope with all the Ugandan Asians? This was a great debate in the 70s. Well, in the end, 27,000 of them came. When we opened the border to the whole of Eastern Europe, 900,000 came in the space of 2 years. We are living in the most overcrowded country in Europe. And we are living in a country now that has a youth unemployment rate of over 1 million people. Over 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds are not in work, and at the same time we have an open door to the whole of Poland and elsewhere, and we say as many of you as want to come to our country to seek work can do so. I think that is absolutely mad, and what is even madder is that if you come from Poland and you can't find a job, well, don't worry, old son, because you can claim job seekers allowance on day 1. We are not against anybody from the rest of the world, but we absolutely believe that at a time of economic recession, at a time of rising unemployment through all the ages, not just the youth, but at a time of rising unemployment, it's about time we said we do not want unlimited foreign labour coming into this country. We want to operate an immigration policy like the Australians, where if you've got something that we need, if you come here, you haven't got a criminal record, you haven't got a life-threatening disease, you are welcome to come to our country. But we've got to stop the open border, and UKIP is the only party that's going to stand up and fight for that. And we've got to start talking about business. I mean, Mr. Osborne yesterday gave his awesome statement. But Mr. Osborne, of course, has never had a job. Nor's Mr. Clegg, nor's Mr. Miliband. I feel I have an advantage. I do have an advantage, Madam Chairman, because I worked in the city for 20 years, and as I always say, I worked damn hard up until lunchtime every day for 20 years. But I do at least have some experience of the real world, and if you meet people, those of you here that are not members, if you meet people in UKIP, you'll find we come from the most incredible cross-section of society. One of the things we want to say as a party is we admire the 4.2 million people in this country who run small businesses or who operate as sole traders. They actually are the heroes of this nation. They are the people that take the risk. They are the people that risk their own money. They are the people that work all the hours God sends. They are the people who create wealth. And wealth is a good thing. And profit is a good thing. Because if people are making profits, they're paying taxes. And if you haven't got people paying taxes, you can't have schools and you can't have hospitals. But nobody is prepared to stand up for these people because they're being crushed by a never-ending stream of legislation on health and safety, on the environment, and worst of all, on employment regulations that is crushing the life out of entrepreneurial flair in this country. free from all of this if just 1 in 4 of our small businesses took on another school leaver. We'd wipe out youth unemployment. So I want UKIP to be the party that talks about business, that talks about growth creation. But none of these things can be done until we get back the ability to govern ourselves and the self-confidence that we used to have as a nation. You know, democracy is something that is very important. It's just been wiped away, hasn't it, in Greece and in Italy, where elected prime ministers have been removed and replaced by technocrats. And when sometimes I'm asked, you know, why do you tour the country? Why do you work all the hours you work? What is it that drives you? Well, I'll tell you. I am determined that my 4 children will be able to grow up in a country that they can call their own, and that is what we're fighting for. We're on the up and we are going to win. Thank you.